Hey everybody, we're back looking at exploring world history lesson number 15, the land between the rivers. And this is the area that we know as Mesopotamia, okay? We've talked about Mesopotamia in some of our other lessons. We'll continue to talk about it. It is an area that has pretty much throughout history and continues to be an extremely important strategic area of the world. Okay, early times, we're talking about Sumer and Babylon. Currently, it's the area of modern day Iraq. And like I said, it's played a significant role in history and will continue to do so. Some of the early people who have controlled the area were the Assyrians and the Persians and, etc. So let's go back and start in the Old Testament and look at some of the information we get from the area from there. Starting with the Tower of Babel. Okay, the Tower of Babel was in the plain of Shinar, which is in Mesopotamia. We had Ur of the Chaldees, which is in modern southern Iraq. Haran, where we saw Abraham had moved to after he was called by God, and that's in modern Turkey. Also Padan Aram in modern Turkey. The exodus of the Jews from Egypt was something we talked about is Balak Hug at Pethor. And this is where Israel was wandering the desert, and it was sent for the prophet during this time, and it was near the river, one of these rivers, okay? The land between these rivers. Also in the book of Judges, one of the times the Israelis were defeated was by Cushan Rishatham, who was the king of Mesopotamia. So it just continues through the Old Testament. We can go all the way to Jonah, who went to Nineveh, right? Talk about the story of Jonah. He's supposed to go to Nineveh, got swallowed by the whale because he refused. Eventually winds up getting spit out and sent to Nineveh. And Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire, which is in Mesopotamia. The Assyrians defeat the northern kingdom of Israel and carried away many captives. Eventually, they fall to the Babylonian Empire. The King Nebuchadnezzar defeats the southern kingdom of Judah and carried away captives. And this is the story of Daniel and the book of Daniel, and he was exiled in Babylon, again in Mesopotamia. The Persian Empire also defeated Babylon. This was the time of Esther in the Old Testament, and that capital was in Susa, which would be in modern day Iran. Okay, so lots and lots of different references to this area, the land between the rivers, Mesopotamia, in the Old Testament. So what about the New Testament? Well, the New Testament, there are very few references to this area, and probably because the dominant power of the time was the Roman Empire. However, if you look in the book of Acts, it talks about the day of Pentecost, and it says, quote, there was residents of Mesopotamia there. Also, Babylon the Great is mentioned in Revelation. So, excuse me, some other things that occurred is the gospel of Mesopotamia went to Mesopotamia. It was brought by Thomas and Thaddeus in the 1st century AD. Eventually, the Persian Empire controls it for several hundred years. There was a very brief Roman control of the area. And then around the 7th century AD, we had the area start to be conquered, eventually completely conquered by the Arabs and the believers of Islam. All the way, that lasted, several hundred years. And then in the 13th century, the Mongols took control of the area. And then in much more modern times, the Ottoman Empire controlled the area, which was basically Turkey. Started in 1638, pretty much until World War I. After World War I, the British took control of the area, and they kind of drew some imaginary lines and created the countries that we currently have. And then we have Iraq and Iran are mostly this area. Iraq became its own country, and in 1968 there was a coup by the Ba'ath Party, which was led by Saddam Hussein, who ruled from 1979 all the way up until semi-modern times. This area, like I said, has always been strategically important. Lots of different wars and battles and things going on there. The most recent wars that we've had in the area go back to, there was a Iraq versus Iran war in the 80s, pretty much all the 80s. Then in the early 1990s, we had the first Gulf War. And then just, more recently, 2003 through about 2010, we had the second Gulf War. And so this area is, like I said, Revelation mentions it, and it, will continue to be an area that needs to be paid attention to. It's has been, always will be, and will continue to be an area of importance for history. And so just remember Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, and for the most part right now, it's modern Iran and Iraq. Thanks.